fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you fall in love with that and you can get your internal people on board with that and your team and your partners and your investors and your customers, if you fall in love with that, that's what keeps you going when times are tough.
Hey folks, thanks for stopping by and checking out the Business Line podcast. In this show, what we're trying to do is get in front of people all over the country, all over the world that are moving and shaking in business, whether they're a part of a big business or they're starting something from the ground up. We want to get to know them. We want to get to know their journey, their struggle, and a little bit about what they love in life. We hope you check out every episode you can. You're used to working with teams of people. That's great. Let's get into that a little bit. So, we talked a little bit before the show. I want to talk about your approach to kind of positive mental attitude and mindset and things and dig a little bit deeper. What do you do when you come across folks on teams that you're working with that struggle with that? That maybe are a little too down on themselves or down on external, maybe they're not following that never, criticize, condemn, and complain kind of thing. And they're kind of living in that world, seeing the world through that lens. How do you approach that? How do you solve that?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've been in a lot of different roles, right? So if I was in a commercial leadership role where people's job is to sell something or do something like in marketing to support the sale of something commercially, that approach and the receptivity from people is different than in other roles. Like my most recent role was, head of like global strategic marketing, which is basically you're shaping the strategy for the company for the future. And you're working with people in all different walks of life across the company. So you're working with engineers that are developing products. You're working with people that make the products and manufacturing. You're dealing with the people that will actually create the inventory and will warehouse it all around the world. We sell at the company I'm with now, it's Mentor at J&J. We sell in over 120 some countries. So You can imagine the complexity with that, just with shipping and managing inventory levels. Because if you have too high inventory levels, that eats up cash for the business, right? And cash, anyone that's listening to you right now that is a business person that owns their own business, it's not about profit. It's not about sales. It's really about how much money do I have at the end of the day. It's cash. Because if you don't have cash, you're either getting it from selling or you're getting it from running a lean business, or you're getting it because you have investors that believe in you and they think that there's a future and they want you to spend in order to get more market share.
Yeah.
But in the end, if you don't have cash, you're dead in the water, right?
Yep.
And working with all these different people, customer service, sales, marketing, it really varies. So, and I would say overall, one of the things that I've seen just across the board is there's a misunderstanding in a larger company. In a smaller company, it's less of a problem of who the customer is, and that helps to motivate people in terms of doing the right thing and to feel, for lack of better words, ingratiated, or to feel as part of a team and that they matter. And so if I was to ask you who your customer is, that's pretty obvious. I'd say, well, I have this product. It's people that buy my product. Like, Joe, why would you ask me that question? It's so easy, right? But in a larger organization where you have people that are supporting quality of a product, or you have people that make a product, or you have people that do something else with it, or you have people that help with pricing or with analysis or market analysis, competitive analysis. When you ask them who their customer is, in general, what I found is they say it's the person that they support within that company. So it's like, oh, my customer is Brian because Brian relies on this information. Otherwise, he can't get the information over to this department. And so Brian's my customer. But in reality, the customer is the people that buy your products, right? So that having that alignment really helps. And also, remember I talked about that purpose before? The having that purpose to say, okay, why are we doing what we do here? Like, why do you do what you do? And it's there's no cookie cutter approach, right, to solving any of these challenges with employees.
Right.
But it's just making time, purposeful time, to stay connected with people, right? And to listen and to understand where they are by not only reading them, but also by asking the questions and showing genuine interest
Mm-hmm.
and really creating, if necessary, because you can't motivate people. That's only short term. I'd have to motivate themselves. So it's really being clear to say, look, here's why I'm really excited about this company. Because when you think about this thing, this is a problem. And I always look for that blue ocean opportunity, right? And you think about any business you're in, right? That blue ocean opportunity is usually hidden in the category that you're selling in. So if you're selling a widget and you're in a certain marketplace, you look at the people that buy the product, for example, and if the penetration rate is low, which usually it is, like let's say in whatever widget you're selling, you look at the population that could buy the product, usually it's very small. Like an iPhone, obviously, in the mobile phones, it's close to 100% penetration. But most businesses, it's like somewhere in the single digit, under 10% of the addressable audience is buying
Right.
that particular type of product in that market that you're in. And so for me, that's really motivational. And I love to educate not only our customers, but also the internal employees to say, look, right now we're in this red ocean fighting, right? Like we're creating products and we're selling to this market. But for me, the thing that drives me, gets me up every day is I believe we have the best solution, not so that I can make lots of money and be successful and then
Mm-hmm.
say, wow, look how successful I was. I believe that if I'm the market leader, and I need all of you guys. We all got to come together. It takes a village to make them successful. It's not just me. It's not just you or you. Like we all have to work together. If we're successful, I really believe that we can create more certainty and invest back in this market to get more people to want to buy these type of products because our product we think delivers a value and kind of goes back to the view of selling, right? If you have a negative view of selling, right? That's you're thinking like, oh, I'm bothering someone. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to see me as someone that is, I had a negative experience with someone that tried to sell me a car and they were just terrible at it. They
Yeah.
just came across unethical and they didn't really care about me. And people are going to think that of me. So, and we think about view of selling in terms of influencing, a good question if you haven't asked your employees this, your salespeople, Brian,
Mm-hmm.
just somewhere out of the blue to create some cognitive dissonance. Say, look, if
Mm-hmm.
you're at a cocktail party, how would you describe what you do for a living? What would you say?
Mm.
Right?
Right.
Because if they're not going to come out and say, I'm a salesperson, if they have a negative view of selling, right? They'll be embarrassed because in that room, there's people that might be attorneys, there might be an engineer that develops cool stuff, there might be a software engineer, there might be a business owner, there might be, I don't know, like a doctor. But to say
Mm-hmm.
you're sales, it's like negative, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to say that. So they're going to say, oh, I work in a company and I solve problems. Or they're going to come up with some euphemistic phraseology,
Right.
right?
Yep.
But in reality, and you know this, right? And a lot of people don't know this. The people who make the most money for any profession are salespeople.
Yeah. It's the highest
They
paying
earn the
professional in
highest,
the world. It's
right?
sales. Yeah.
Right? It's a hard job, right? And it's a hard job to do really well. And so that higher purpose, going back to that and talking about where people's view and the value that they bring to hitting this bigger goal. And I just say, look, I can't motivate you to want to have the right attitude and stuff. But if you believe that that more people should be using these type of products, if you believe that that's a possibility, and if you believe that the services and the value that we put out there is something that could make a difference to make that market better, and so that drives us to go out and do more, not so that we're just being selfish to make money. And if you believe that your role in that is vital and important,
Mm.
all of that stuff, you're going to be self-motivated to do the functional things you need to do to be successful. If you don't buy into this market or you don't really like the products that you're selling or you don't like what you're doing, I'm going to be candid with you. I can't convince you to like all that stuff.
Right.
And
Right.
the best thing for you to do would be to really think, and I've had to have these conversations to
Mm.
say, I want you to go back home and I want you to really think about what's going to make you happy. And you can go talk to your family if you need to talk to them.
Yeah.
And if you can't reconcile with that, you shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And I help people. I say, look, I'm not going to ruin your life. I'm not going to fire you and make you look bad so you can't get another job. I just want you to be honest with me that this isn't right for you and you just can't get over that. And people do come back and say, I thought about it. I was crying at home. I can't believe I was doing this. And you're right. I haven't been working hard. I've had a bad attitude. I just don't like this business. I don't want to do this anymore. And
Yeah.
it doesn't fit with what I want to do. Right. And so thank you for helping me to see that. I really trust you, Joe, that you're not going to hurt me. And I say, look, oh, how much time do you need to find a job? Because I won't get in your way. I
Yeah.
just need you to, in some cases, I'll say, look, you can go right now, I could continue to pay you for a few more weeks, and then we'll figure things out.
Yep.
But I'm never going to hurt you because I don't want to destroy your life here. And
Right.
you got to go find what you're best suited at. And so
Yep.
sometimes you got to let people go, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep, that's absolutely it. That's absolutely right. Hey, thanks for sharing that. That was big. I think a lot of people run into that from both sides, whether they're the person in
Oh,
your
yeah.
seat, Joe, or the person in your team member, your employee's seat. That, man, it's hard to reconcile that and tell yourself the truth that this isn't really for me. That's phenomenal advice.
The other thing, Brian, when you think about like the things that you do, right? Or you need your people to do it. When it really comes down to it, you have to work hard. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it takes hard work. It's not fun, right? And I heard this quote before. You might have heard it too. It's like, no one's ever drowned in their own sweat. Like,
Right.
and I was taught by one of my mentors early in my career, because what we hear today, especially in corporate America, but even just in general, with as new generations come into the workforce, that
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'm not going to be like the generation before. They have no balance.
Yeah.
I'm going to have perfect balance in my life, and I'm going to show the previous generations that the way they did it isn't going to work. And I was the same way as a Generation
Mm-hmm.
X person, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I felt like, oh, the generation before, they didn't get it. And that's the evolution of the species, right? Like, you need people to think that they're better and everyone else sucks, right? That's just the way a society
Yep.
evolves, right? It's
You need that
natural, right? And there's not,
conflict. Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
when I think about the hard work aspect, someone told me that, when you're working really hard, right? Just think of it like you're in overtime sometimes, right? So you don't feel
Yeah.
like you're overwhelmed, but they said that, think of it like an EKG, right? So that it's like a QRS thing, right? So someone's in a hospital, they got the little things on their
Mm-hmm.
chest, and there's like
Yep.
this thing going like this, right? When you think about an EKG, people sometimes confuse when to use the analogy to working hard, that I've gone 2 or 3 days at a pace that I normally don't go at, and I'm really uncomfortable, and I need balance. And where it becomes a problem is usually the significant other or people around them notice that they're not the same, they're a little more irritable, they're not sleeping as much, and they're really consumed. And those
Mm-hmm.
people will influence them to say, what are you doing? You don't have balance in your life. What are you working like this for? What, do they pay you enough? Right? Do they treat you well?
Yeah.
The attitude that I was taught, and it really served me well, is that there's going to be times if you look at a spectrum of time of over a year, that you're going to be at the top of that QRS, just like your heartbeat,
Yep.
right? You're going to be at the top, and it might last for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, but it's not going to go 365 days where
Right.
you're at this pace you can't stop. You're
Yep.
you're going to come down to a nice low, you can relax. But ultimately, when you think of the QRS, it's called sinus rhythm, right? Like your steady state, which
Mm-hmm.
is around 72, 60, depending what type of condition you're in.
Mm-hmm.
In life, whether you have your own business or you're working for someone, you're going to have a steady state. And if you look over a longer period of time, you'll have balance. And so that's how I used to trick myself when I was really working hard and people were criticizing me. Hey, you work too hard. What's wrong with you? You're like, yeah, I have a balance in your life. I said, look, I don't believe in having balance every day.
Yeah.
I
You
got to
can't.
look at it over a longer period of time, right? So,
Yeah. So either there's that law of thermodynamics, and I think it applies to how we live and grow and get better, or slowly get worse. And when I've seen a similar type of EKG type chart, but applied to how we're approaching our lives and what we're doing in stress, right? So when it's up, you're getting to this level of eustress where you experience growth, and if you get too far up in that for too long, that's when you're breaking down, you're running out of steam, you start to question, I'm working too hard, I'm out of rhythm, out of balance. But there's also the other side, when you're chasing too much pleasure, you're chasing too much comfort, which it's often really easy to get into that rhythm. Oh, I just need to chase that comfort. And then when you achieve that comfort, you actually start to backslide. So a lot of it is, it's the same when you're exercising, right? If you're running and you're running too fast for too long, you're getting into that lactic acid and you can't sustain it. You eventually fall over, right? But when you can find that rhythm, and you're going to burn the most calories, and you're going to have a good stress level on your cardiovascular, and you're actually doing good by being at an elevated level of stress physically. And the same thing happens for mental stress or approaching your day-to-day life and working. It's, again, being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and that phrase, that's so well said. We just had a internal meeting yesterday, and with some on a kind of board type meeting,
Mm-hmm.
and the question comes up from HR around, hey, people are afraid to maybe speak up, or they're afraid to do this and that, and it really comes down to comfort level with whether you want to call it doing your job or and for whatever role, whether it's sales, leadership, engineering, this whole concept, this is a really important hot button for me. What I've experienced in myself and in others that struggle with this, because I've struggled with this before early on, and not anymore, but I struggled with the fact that people will generally default to comfort in their life. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem, because it's the enemy of being effective. And so people will say, whether they have to do a public speaking, or they have to get interviewed by the press, or they have to give a presentation that's really important, they're going to say, look, I just want to make sure I'm comfortable up there.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because if someone right now thinks they need to be comfortable, they know how to do that, but you're just not going to be effective. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's a mindset. It's like, listen, whether I'm giving a big speech, I got to sell, or I got to do something I'm really scared about doing, you want to say to yourself that I want to be effective, right?
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
and to do that, you're going to be a little uncomfortable, because the things you need to do to prepare for that, you're not going to be comfortable with that.
Yep.
And you're probably going to make a mistake. It's probably not going to be perfect. But the only way you learn, I've never met anyone successful in life that, doesn't
Got it all
fail
right.
and learn from that, right?
Yep.
So,
Exactly. And a lot of you hit on another point too, is like when you're attacking something new, you get in that zone of uncomfortable, and you're messing things up a little bit. Don't be too quick when you fall down to stand back up. Don't stay down there. Don't get down on yourself, but recognize what happened. What do I got to pick up off the floor as I'm getting up? Because that's the process of learning from what got you to fall in the first
yeah,
place, right? You tripped up. Oh, my shoe's
yeah,
untied. Let me tie that real quick. Now I'll stand up and I'll keep going. A lot of times we fall, and did anybody see us fall? Nobody saw. Okay, I'm up again. I'm good. Everybody, I'm right. And that's just an illustration of, if we get up too quickly, we don't learn from what put us down in the first place.
it's really a mindset, right? Especially for some of your listeners who are starting their own business, or they already have a
Mm-hmm.
business, or they're working, or they want to go into business, they're in school, whatever it is, or whatever they want to do, and like they want to be a
Mm-hmm.
professional athlete. To have a mindset and a culture and a belief that I need to fail in order to be successful in life. And that if I don't fail, I'm really failing
Right.
in life.
Exactly.
Because
Yep.
if you don't fail, you're not putting yourself out there. And I've never met anyone that's successful that doesn't put themselves out there to risk. And even the people that we deem as successful, if you really analyze what they've achieved in their life, they've had a lot of failure in their life. That's
Yep.
embarrassing.
Yep.
And yet we only see the moments of greatness, right? And the reality is we don't see all the other stuff. And so I think that's an important point.
When I was not in, business ownership and stuff, and kind of out on our own doing our thing here, I do it when I do interviews for new jobs, and eventually you're in front of kind of the top person that you're going to be working for or in the company. One of my questions was, tell me about the biggest failure you've ever had. Because what I wanted to get out of the person that is going to be working for, that they were humble enough to at least share where they failed and how they learned and got back up.
It's a great question.
Yeah. Because most people are
I love
used to
that.
being asked, tell me about your biggest success. I want to hear about this
Right.
cool stuff. I want to hear about the down and dirty when you thought you were going to give up, but you decided not to.
Yeah.
Or when you just screwed things up royally and you thought your life was over. Because that's where you really learn what people are made of.
That's right. And if someone is incapable to give you a good raw example, that
Mm-hmm.
really sends a signal of where they are emotionally and maturity wise, and experiential wise. And it gives you a good glimpse into whether or not that would be a good fit for you, right?
Yep.
So I love that. And we, some people say that, well, we live in a culture now where we don't allow people to fail, right? Where, I think in school now you can do extra credits and stuff, and so that you can get a 4.4
Yeah.
GPA. And,
Yeah. That's not
and
helping.
so what happens when you go into the real world where there's no makeup, right? Where you've got to, there's no whole, if you put out this extra effort and you wear these nice clothes, I'll give you a couple extra bonus points to perform, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a rude awakening, right, for people that don't have the attitudinal sense of what's really required to be successful. Something else that kind of goes along this too, especially because you have listeners, I think, that have their own business, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Oh, for
right?
sure. Yeah,
Um, and
absolutely.
I know you do as well. And um, one of the things, if I was really to boil something down here and be succinct with it, to keep, you mentioned something at the beginning that, you know, it's one thing to be excited about an idea and a business and a product that you're selling and the solution. I call it like the mousetrap, whatever you want to call it. It's a
Yeah.
there's a short term excitement. It's a seductive force,
It's
right?
the honeymoon period.
It's
Yeah.
but yeah, that I'm gonna like be so successful and everyone's like patting you on the back saying, go get it. And then as you go further down the path, it's not so much fun anymore, right? Like the chemicals associated with that, you get a high, right? It's real. It's a chemical release in your body that
Absolutely.
makes you feel good and excited. But that goes away. It doesn't sustain. And so how do you keep that sustained and do it in a way that's real and visceral, so that you're actually doing the things that you need to do to be successful? I remember, like, I was fortunate to be on this Zoom call with some other people from work with James Cameron, and he
Mm.
was.
Okay.
This is during the drop a name here, right, from Canada.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is during the pandemic when he was in New Zealand filming Avatar: The Way of the Water, whatever that movie's
Okay.
called. And
Okay.
so, and he apparently has several other avatars coming out after that, like a few more coming out. And so he took some time in the studio to talk to a group of people over Zoom, and Zoom was kind of a new thing back then, right? And
Right.
talk about his successes and what he's learned along the way. And one of the things he talked about, he said, when you're making a movie, the first couple weeks are amazing. Everyone's excited. Everyone's helping each other. It's just like, you can't even sleep, he said, right? Because it
Yeah. Yeah.
just, it's amazing. He says, but every single movie I've made, when I get to day 60, it is awful.
It's a
People
grind,
are
right?
miserable. Yeah, it's a grind. And he just talks about how difficult it is, right? And so he had to change himself. And he said he had to become he said he wasn't the nicest person early in his career because he's
Mm.
like, hey guys, like this movie's going to be amazing. Like this Terminator movie, I think I'm onto something. I'm using technology that's never been used before. And for the first time, I'm not using a Hollywood effects studio to do any of my effects. I'm using a computer. And I think
Yeah.
this is going to be amazing. But it seemed weird when they were filming it, right? Like it was on a green screen and you couldn't see all the effects.
Right.
And when you
Yeah.
get to this day 60, people are all miserable saying,
They can't
and
see.
he
They've
used
lost the
to
vision,
he
right? They've
yes,
lost the
and he
vision,
used to be so
the
hard on them. Say,
purpose.
what's wrong
Yeah.
with you people? Come on, why can't you be like me? Work hard. Get rid of this person, and
Yeah.
and he said he had to learn. He used the word tender. He said, I'd learn to be more tender and compassionate with people and to inspire them and to say, look, this is going to be tough. I'm having a tough time too. I don't want to get up in the morning. I'm
Yeah.
exhausted. Like we've
Yeah.
been filming till 3 in the morning, and I know you as the actress have still got to look good. We got to put more makeup on you, whatever it is. But he said it's not fun, right? And he said getting through that is critical. And I equate that to business in that, you know, when you get, beyond that honeymoon period, how do you keep yourself going? Do it in a real way so that you're actually going to drive to success. And one of the things that I've learned, and and I wish I could take credit that I learned this on my own through some
Mm.
divine thing
Mm.
that I've done, because most learning, as you know, right, is through either failure or it's someone
Absolutely.
else teaching you something, right?
Yep.
And I believe, and this is no knock on people that don't have formal education or who don't educate. I believe some form of education doesn't have to be formal where you go to an Ivy League school or anything. It could be like reading, it could be listening to podcasts, but
Yep.
some type of learning. If you're not doing that, it's okay. I mean, you're still going to get by. But the
Mm-hmm.
reality is, and I learned this, I was able to do this executive business program at Stanford, right? So the
Mm-hmm.
company was very gracious to pay for that. So I'm staying on the campus, and
Yeah.
going to school with backpacks and all that good stuff, as an older professional.
Like back to
And
school. Yeah.
right,
Rodney
oh, it's terrible. It's
Dangerfield.
like worse than Rodney Dangerfield.
Right.
Uh, no one will know what that reference is, right? But what I learned there is that they say that if you're not failing, and Stanford is the school of disruption, right? That business school. And
Mm,
so there, when you think about all the like there with Zuckerberg and Apple, all these companies that have been influenced educationally from that institution, those cultures are cultures where if you're not failing and documenting your failures on a regular basis, you're not going to get a good performance review,
right.
because people know that in order to be disruptive and to create innovation that's really transformative, you got to fail. You got to get
Hmm.
outside what people think is good today, and you got to get to that different level. And the example is, when you think about how people kept their food from spoiling, it used to be they cut ice out of a river, right? And
Right.
then
Yep.
they realized, well, weather is getting in the way of that, and so they had to develop factories that could create ice, and then the refrigerator. So you think about that innovation that
Oh
happened,
yeah.
right? These are huge seismic things that we take for granted, but the reason I'm bringing this up as an example is what I learned at Stanford was don't fall in love with your product or your solution. Fall
Mm,
in love with the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you fall in love with that and you can get your internal people on board with that, and your team and your partners and your investors and your customers, if you fall in love with that, that's what keeps you going when times are tough. Because if you fall in love with your product and it's not quite meeting everyone's needs, then your salespeople feel like they're selling something that's not really meeting someone's needs.
yep.
Now, and oftentimes there is a skill set, and I find that some salespeople will exaggerate to say, "Oh, I feel like I'm not really bringing value here, and we got to change something," which is sometimes true, but sometimes it's just the way that their skill is, and they're not looking at things right.
Hmm.
But innovation isn't just the mousetrap or the product. Innovation is, how do we educate ourselves to operate better? How do
Hmm.
we educate ourselves and improve our skill to be more dynamic and persuasive? And a lot of innovation, like you mentioned, how you take time with your people and you go through that stuff, it's so great. Um, that stuff coupled with your mousetrap and falling in love with your product allow you to at least be flexible to adapt and change, because your world is changing all around you, and you might have to change the mousetrap based on
Mm,
what we're hearing, or you might have to change the way you do things. How many times have you heard this, Brian? That, oh, you know what? I don't know why you're giving me this negative feedback, Brian. It sounds like you're not aligned with me, because the last
yeah.
couple of years I've been so successful, and you know that. And why are you giving me a hard time now? It's like,
Yep.
hey, man, the world's changed a little bit, and the stuff you did yesterday, it's still great stuff. It's not going to cut it anymore. You're getting
Yep.
you're getting out competed right now. And if you
Yep.
don't see that, we got a problem.
Yep. It's every day in our business, in the lines of services that we have. And I love what you said there. I'm going to try to put a pin in that in my head and remember that and bring that up to my business partners. Like, we can't fall in love with our products and services that we're offering right now. We got to fall in love with the problems that we're facing and that we're trying to solve, because we have to change those
Yeah.
products or services, or adapt and offer new ones in order to outcompete and solve those problems better.
Yeah. It's that's really well said. And even when you're trying to develop relationships, there's a concept. You heard of the concept of challenger sales?
Let me hear it.
So I won't go into it because it's a whole other it's a long thing,
We'll
but
just we'll, we'll
you
just do
could
a different
you
podcast on that.
yeah, you could just look up challenger sale.
Challenger sale. Okay.
It's something that I was involved with early. We have this association in Washington. It's called the Corporate Executive Board, and they're
Hmm.
developing a new way to sell,
Okay.
basically, right? To change, obviously needs based selling and asking questions and being authentic and caring about the problem and all that. That's so valuable, right? In building relationships. But
Hmm.
what what this think of McKinsey type people discovered
Okay.
was that the traditional selling was undifferentiated from other talented people who could develop relationships, right? And spend money to invest in relationships and all that. And so the question was, could a selling skill, could an approach to selling be innovative and differentiated to bring value to a company that's attributable? You can create attribution for the actual sale beyond all the important skills that you know from,
Mm-hmm.
planning for a call, opening a call, delivering a message, understanding the needs, listening and closing. If someone does that well, it's hard to compare one company to another if they're both
Mm-hmm.
doing that well and their mousetraps are similar that they're selling. And so the challenger sale, the whole thing was rather than lead with the concept is this, rather than lead with benefits when you're going to give that value proposition to your customer, you lead them to your benefits. And the concept comes from, and you can go Google this to get more info. The classic case was Volvo. Volvo was struggling in their truck division. So I got to be careful. Hopefully, Volvo doesn't sue me. I misrepresent this. So they're struggling with their trucking division in
Mm-hmm.
terms of selling trucks. Right,
Mm-hmm.
they're the big 18-wheeler type trucks.
Yeah. Yep.
So they have a premium truck, and they tried all these different marketing campaigns, selling skills, everything to try to sell more trucks. They even lowered the price. They did different levers, if you will. And what they found is they continued to lose market share and strengthen the marketplace. So this group of think tank, in looking to see if they could help solve this, they focused on the art of selling, and this is where the challenger sale came up. Is they did some market research, and they discovered things like, the people that drove the trucks, loved Volvo more than any other truck, right? And they had all the different reasons why they loved it. Like when they looked at all the attributes of the truck compared to other companies like Kenmore, Mack Trucks, for example,
Yeah.
Peterbilt, whatever the different manufacturers are. In those surveys amongst drivers, it came out as the best. So they went back and they to go to these dealerships that would buy these trucks, like these trucking firms and other transportation firms, to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, look, we did this research and we got the best trucks. Like, and then always came back, well, it's a little expensive. I'm going to go someone else, right? So,
Yep.
so then they went back to the drawing board, and this is where the challenger concept came up. They started to ask deeper level questions to the trucking firms to say, okay, well, what are the real problems you have here, right? Like, what's going on, right? And what they discovered was that their biggest problem that they had was that their labor, the people that would drive the trucks to get the goods across the country or wherever they were going, they had a very high turnover rate. And
Mm.
every trucking firm had this problem where they would only stay for a small amount of time. And it was kind of astounding, like when you look at the charts to see what that looked like. And when they asked him, I said, well, tell me more about that. What's the pain associated with that? What is that really? And the
Mm-hmm.
owner would say, well, it's not really a big deal because when I talk to my buddies or other companies, everyone has the same problem. So we just have accepted it, right? So then
Right.
the
Yep.
challenger sale concept came up where these smart people from McKinsey said, well, what does it cost you, do you think, to have this turnover? Oh, it's no big deal because everyone has it. So they broke it down for them. They say, hey, do you mind if we actually analyze this for you? And so when they analyzed it, they realized that the costs to hire people and to have interruption in their business, and depending on the size of the firm, was hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars,
Mm-hmm.
just to keep the people. So then these smart
Yep.
people that started to see this come together, they went back to the people they interviewed in that quantitative and qualitative survey, these truck drivers, to say, well,
Mm-hmm.
you like the truck. Why did you like the truck so much? Well, it's like my office. Like I see myself as a business owner, and if I'm going to be in my office for a long time, going across the country, this thing's got to be comfortable. And if that thing's not comfortable, I don't care how well you treat me, I'm not going to do the job. And so
Right.
when they started to get feedback, more qualitative feedback on the Volvo trucks, they said, look, if I had a truck like this, I'm not going anywhere. I love this. I would never leave.
Yep.
Right. And so you could see where this is going. And so Volvo went back, and when they started to go to trucking firms to sell with the same salespeople, they took a different approach, and they talked about the problem, and they talked about the cost of the problem, and got the truck driver the trucking companies to kind of bask in that pain of, well, it's a good point. I guess I am. And because they had actual data to show them, right? To say, look, you're spending millions of dollars on this, or you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. But our research shows, and we asked the very direct question of these truck drivers, if you had a Volvo truck, would you leave the company? And they said, no, if someone offered me a Volvo truck, I would stay. And so we calculate you have 340 drivers working at any given time. With this lower turnover rate, the savings you're going to get are $2.3 million if you use Volvo. Now, the catch here, just to be candid with you, they would say, is that you're going to spend an extra $30,000 on a Volvo truck than you will any other thing on the market. But when you look at buying this many trucks and you look at what you're going to save, you're net positive here. And so they develop programs to say, we're going to help you track this so you can see this. And if this doesn't work out, we'll figure out a rebate system. You can go back to buying the cheaper trucks if you want. Guess what happened? Their sales shot up.
They sold Volvos.
Right? And so that's the challenge. So you could read more about the Challenger sale. There's a book on it. There's probably podcasts.
Sounds very much like what I've learned. I learned years ago, and having some success in IT sales. I latched onto a company that was using some techniques. It wasn't called that, but they used from a book called Question-Based Selling. But what it teaches is PAS versus SPA. And so PAS is problems, alternatives, solutions, right? So you're asking questions, uncovering problems, not surface level, multiple levels deep, right? It's like, what are your biggest problems? Well, my biggest problems is that we're having computer problems all the time. Okay, great. Oh, really? Why is that? Well, that's the reason we're always having problems is because my office manager is my IT person. Oh, okay. And how does she feel about it? How does it make you feel that she's doing not the work she's supposed, so like you dig deep, you uncover the real problems, i.e. the problem isn't that the Volvo truck is more expensive. That's not, we're not buying it. They uncovered the problem of, holy crap, our drivers aren't happy. They're going to leave the company, right? So same thing.
Love that.
Most people, when they're selling, so they're going, here's all of our solutions, features, benefits, features, benefits, features, benefits. And here's how they're going to address your problems. Oh, wait, I didn't even ask you what your problems were. I'm just going to assume that these are your problems. And if you don't buy this, here's your alternatives. As opposed to saying, let's uncover all these problems. I'll ask the questions. You tell me what they are. I'm going to connect to you emotionally, right? Because that's why you're going to buy, and you're going to support it with the logic. But then, okay, Mr. Business Owner, if you don't solve these problems you just told me about, what are the alternatives? What's going to happen? Well, blah, 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 blah. And you're going to leverage those when you're presenting later on. And then after you've done all that work, that's when we're going to present the solutions, and the solutions are married directly to the problems that have been uncovered.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right? So,
and it's a sophisticated way of influencing, and it's not what I would call selling, because really you're not doing anything to anyone. And you're actually helping. And if sales professionals, business owners, whatever, if they really look at life like that, whether you're doing this with a family member to influence them to do something, or a friend, or you're selling a widget, an actual thing for a company, if you really take that approach, people will see, it's like that reciprocity, right? They're seeing that, look, Brian, I come from a company and I'm going to be trying to pretending I'm selling you something, right? Like, I'm here to potentially sell you something. I want to be really clear and candid. Yep. If I can't bring value and I can't have you happy and glad that I'm on your team, then I shouldn't be selling you anything. I'm going to be really candid with you.
Yep.
And I want to save you time and me time. But if you're willing to open yourself up a little bit to see if I can do that, and if I can't do that, I don't want you to buy anything from me. I'd rather you not buy something from me. So let's don't worry about what I'm selling, what I'm doing. And this is not a manipulation to get you to like me. No. This is really, and if you're not willing...
It's just pointing out the elephant in the room. Yeah. That's what you're doing.
And you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to do that.
Yep.
It all kind of circles back, right?